Today, we're going to tackle a really critical idea for anyone working with AI safely and effectively, and that's this. What if we stop thinking of people as users and start treating them as actual core components of the system? So, the whole point of this explainer is to really nail down why we have to treat human thinking, cognition, as a fundamental part of the AI's operating environment. This isn't just a nice idea, it changes everything about how we design, test, and govern these systems. Okay, before we get started, we need to be crystal clear about something. Nothing in this explainer gives anyone the green light to use, deploy, or promote any AI outputs, under any circumstances. That kind of authority, it only comes from very specific, formal evaluation and governance processes. Those are defined somewhere else entirely. So, just to be clear, this is all about understanding the concepts, not giving permission to act. So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about scope and authority. Then, we'll get into redefining the system boundary. After that, we'll explore what we call the human variable and look at a really common failure pattern, miscalibration. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with governance and evaluation. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Scope and Authority. This is all about setting the stage and understanding the operational context we're working in. Okay, so to make sure we're all on the same page, let's define a key term you'll hear a lot, the execution environment. Now, this isn't just the software or the AI model itself. Think bigger. It's the entire system, and that explicitly includes all the tech and all the human parts that have any influence on the final result. That leads us perfectly into Section 2, where we're going to redefine the system boundary. We're going to shift our thinking from just looking at individual components to seeing the whole system. And this really gets to the heart of it. On the one hand, you have the common way of looking at things. You focus on the model, the data, the tools, and you see the person as some kind of external user. But then you have the operational reality. And in that reality, the human operator isn't external at all. They're a core component inside the system boundary. So, let's put a picture to this, right? What you're seeing here is that typical but incomplete view. It treats the AI subsystem as its own little self-contained technical box. And now, look at this. This shows the critical shift in thinking. The real operational system boundary gets bigger. It expands to include the human operator. See, the person isn't on the outside looking in anymore. They are a fundamental, an integral part of how the system executes. So what does that mean for the whole process? Well, the full execution loop now looks like this. You start with an input. It goes to the AI for processing. But, and this is the key part, the AI's output doesn't go straight to an action. It has to pass through a stage of human judgment first. That step, that human judgment, is totally inseparable from the system's function, and more importantly, from its risk profile. And that brings us right to Section 3, the human variable, because this is where we get into why we can't and absolutely must not treat human thinking as some stable, predictable constant. It's so easy to fall into this trap. We just assume that the human in the loop is this stable, reliable constant. But the reality, the operational reality, is that human cognition is a variable. It's not a constant. It's something that actively introduces noise and bias right into the middle of the system's process. So when I say variability, what do I actually mean? Well, think about all these factors. Simple judgment calls, being tired, physically or mentally, how confident someone feels, being under a deadline, or even just how well a person deals with unclear information. The bottom line is, you can give two different operators the exact same AI output, and they might take two completely different actions. Okay, so now let's look at how this human variability can lead to a really specific and, frankly, dangerous type of failure. This brings us to Section 4, the failure pattern of miscalibration. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's what happens when someone's confidence gets way ahead of their actual understanding. And if you remember one thing from this whole explainer, make it this. Confidence rises faster than understanding. It's so true. When a system spits out something that looks plausible, especially when you're just starting to use it, it's incredibly deceptive. It can give the operator a totally false sense of confidence. So how does this downward spiral happen? Well, it starts innocently enough. The system produces some plausible-looking outputs. And just like that, the operator's confidence shoots up. And then what happens? They start to let their guard down. They stop checking, they stop verifying things with the same care they used to.
And right there, at that exact moment, silent risk has just crept into your system. And certain things make this miscalibration happen even faster. When an operator's tired, their skepticism just plummets. When they're rushing to meet a deadline, blind trust in the system goes way up. And maybe the most subtle one, if an output looks familiar, it just feels right, even when it's dead wrong. So what's the big red flag here? What's the number one warning sign you need to look for in the real world? It's simple: confidence without evidence. The second an operator stops checking their work because an output just feels right, that's it. Your system is now running with unmanaged risk. All right, let's bring this all home in our final section. Let's see how all of this feeds into a proper governance framework. Welcome to Section 5, Governance and Evaluation. This is all about how we actually manage this human variable we've been talking about. Remember that system diagram we were looking at? Well, we're adding one last crucial piece to it: the promotion boundary. The easiest way to think about this is like a formal gate or a checkpoint. It's a control point that sits between the everyday work loop and any kind of authorized official use of that work. And this all leads us to a central rule of governance. Because human thinking is variable, because it's not a constant, you can't just assume you have the authority to act on a system's output. Nope, that authority has to be earned. It has to be backed up by evidence, formally evaluated, and constantly reviewed. So this really leaves us with one critical question you have to ask yourself for any system you're running. Is your evaluation process actually calibrated for human variability? I mean, are you really testing the entire system, the tech plus the human operator, under real-world conditions? Or are you just testing the AI part in a vacuum? And let's end with one final, very important reminder. Just because you've completed this explainer, that does not imply readiness or grant any kind of permission. It is always formal evaluation and governance that determine authority. Thanks for your time.